It looks like we are not going to get a war this week, or at least not immediately. Donald Trump has backed down again. He had threatened to start a war with Iran again, or restart the kinetic portion of the war, but apparently he's not going to, and at least not immediately. And that was not such a surprise. There were some expectations that the war would start up again, but there was also a lot of caveats and cautions that Trump has tacoed in the past. That is, he has chickened out. Trump always chickens out. That's one of the things that they were saying about him when it comes to these kinds of very high-risk maneuvers. And it appears that he has backed down again. The reasons for that are a little bit more complicated and hard to figure out because there's contradictory messages being put out in the media. I am Borzu Dergahi. This is the latest edition of my podcast. By the time you get this, it's going to be Wednesday, May 20th. I'm in Istanbul. I'm a longtime foreign correspondent, and I've been running this podcast for some months now. And the focus wasn't originally supposed to be just on this war in Iran, but lately there's been a lot on this war in Iran. It helps, I think, to go through the sequence of events. The war ended in early April. If viewers and listeners recall, it was right at the moment where Trump basically threatened to bomb Iran's oil and energy installations. And Iran, in turn, threatened that if the U.S. did that, it would respond by targeting energy and electricity and oil and gas and desalination plants and infrastructure in the Persian Gulf and Israel. And at that point, Trump said, oh, there's been a negotiation, hallelujah, where we made a breakthrough and we're going to resume talks and we're going to delay any further attack. In the interim between early April and now, Trump has done this a few times. And I don't really understand the philosophy behind what he's doing. He just keeps threatening and bullying and saying that what Iran is not doing is not enough. He's threatening to bomb them to smithereens. He uses all sorts of inflammatory rhetoric when he talks about what he's going to do with Iran. And then at the last minute, he backs out. In this particular case, Trump said that Gulf allies, that is the Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Qatar beseeched him not to launch this attack, that there were these breakthrough discussions. Iran said that there had been no breakthrough. And as a matter of fact, Pakistan is the intermediary and not Saudi Arabia and not Qatar, especially not the United Arab Emirates, which essentially Iran has been treating as an extension of Israel. I don't think that they were involved in the talks. I don't think that there's any breakthroughs that are being mediated by the United Arab Emirates. Perhaps Qatar, there were some diplomatic communications between Qatar and Iran. Saudi Arabia, I don't think so either. And as a matter of fact, the Wall Street Journal interviewed some Gulf intermediaries, and they were all like, we don't know what Trump is talking about. Then the New York Times had this interesting few paragraphs buried in a story quoting people in the U.S. military as saying that the real reason Trump backed down was that his own military planners were saying that, look, Iran has really gotten good at tracking our planes. It's quite dangerous what they've been able to do. They've basically been working with the Russians to come up with ways of downing U.S. planes. If viewers or listeners recall, at the end of the kinetic phase of the, let's call it the 40-day war that began on February 28th, Iran did indeed start downing American planes and hitting them from the air, shooting them down. There was a few incidents. There was also this wild incident where the Americans apparently sent this rescue mission to get these two downed pilots. Where are those pilots, by the way? I don't know. There was also reports in recent days that were reiterated in this New York Times report that Iran has managed to reassemble a lot of the missile launchers and munitions and has managed to access caves where it has been keeping these munitions and missiles and so on. So it's much better prepared and that it won't be an easy target. There were also reports that Iran was preparing to launch 500 projectiles a day. Missiles, drones, I'm not sure what exactly was the combination, because drones are a lot more easy to launch and much more plentiful than Iran's ballistic missiles at the Gulf, basically destroying the entire world economy. So I think those reasons are probably much more why the Trump administration decided to back down. The Trump message is also somewhat incoherent. Trump and his minions keep saying that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon. According to some experts that I have talked to over the years, Iran doesn't even really have the capability to put together a nuclear weapon at this point. It has the know-how, but it doesn't really have the tools yet. It has not perfected the art of miniaturizing the enriched uranium required. That's the fissile material, the fissile fuel. It will need to test it. So there's no urgency, and there was never any urgency with regard to Iran's nuclear program. Iran had a theoretical nuclear capability to create weapons. It definitely had a nuclear program that was declared and under inspection to a certain degree until the 12-day war last year, launched by Israel and then later the United States. It was under international inspection. So we know that Iran has a nuclear program. And then Trump keeps saying that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. And he keeps giving these dire warnings about what will happen if Iran gets a nuclear weapon. But they don't have a nuclear weapon, and they keep saying that they're not going to get a nuclear weapon. And there's really no way that you can destroy intent if Iran is dead set on acquiring a nuclear weapon. What are you going to do about that? You're going to have to take out the whole regime. Okay, well, if that's the plan, then sell that to the American people, sell that to the partners, sell that to the European Union and other partners in NATO, sell that to Turkey, that they're going to take out this regime next door and create a huge, massive flood of refugees. And I think the rhetoric is just meant for public consumption. It's a talking point, like with Saddam Hussein and George Bush and the early 2000s with Saddam Hussein is going to get nuclear weapons. He's going for weapons of mass destruction. And this is just a simplified way of defining America's unclear goals with regard to Iran for the masses, for the tiny percentage of Americans that wholeheartedly support the war. By the way, there was a poll out today that showed that more than 60% of Americans are opposed to the war, that they do not want this conflict. So I think Trump has that problem too. But Trump says he doesn't care, and he said that repeatedly. And he's made some other comments that were just kind of like they showed a certain cluelessness.
I'm not doing this politically. Look, everyone tells me it's unpopular, but I think it's very popular. When they hear that it's having to do with nuclear weapons, weapons that could take out Los Angeles, could take out major cities very quick. When they hear that, when they're explaining, I'll tell you what, when we explain it to people, I don't really have enough time to explain it to people. I'm too busy getting it done. When they understand, I think it's frankly very popular, but whether it's popular or not popular, I have to do it.
How long does it take for Iran to come?
Well, I'm saying 2 or 3 days, maybe Friday, Saturday, Sunday, something, maybe early next week, a limited period of time. Because we can't let them have a nuclear weapon.
Trump keeps making these threats. He keeps saying that he can relaunch the war anytime he wants. He keeps threatening Iran with oblivion and so on. But here's the thing. If you recall, at the end of the war, Trump basically, he threatened like genocide against Iran. He threatened to wipe out the entire Iranian civilization. He basically said he was going to bomb all the bridges and power plants. A whole civilization is going to be wiped out, he said. And that didn't get the Iranians to buckle. They basically were like, bring it on. And if you look at the Iranian messaging now, it's the same message. It's like, okay, bring it on. If you look at some of the comments from the officials, the IRGC, they are more than ready and willing to fight. The Americans stop with the rhetoric of, Iran's leadership is in disarray, because it's clearly not true, because they keep giving out the same message, and it's just a fiction that Iran's leadership is in disarray. But there are major disagreements, I think, between the various factions. One side is more in favor of diplomacy. That includes the foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, and that includes the president, Masoud Pezeshkian. But then there's another more hardline faction, IRGC guys, the guys who are really running the show, the Revolutionary Guard. Guard guys, they're all like, bring it on. They want war. And let me just tell you something, having lived in Iran and having dealt with these people, there is a huge group of people in that country who are really just as militaristic and chauvinistic and macho and enamored of war as there are those types of people in the United States. And many of them are not LARPers. I mean, there's a lot of Iranians who are veterans of the Syria conflict, who have seen combat on the fields of Syria, working with Syrian armed forces against ISIS, as well as Syrian rebels. There are IRGC people and commanders who have worked with Hezbollah and with the Iraqi Shia militias, as well as possibly, but probably less so, with the Houthis in Yemen, probably less directly on the ground, probably through intermediaries such as Hezbollah. There's a language difficulty there. There are these people, and they're really into going to war. They've died in their own minds. They've died 1,000 times. They're not as like casualty averse as the American military is. They're probably eager to fight, and they consider dying for Iran, like, and for Islam. They consider it like glorious, and they consider it something that they welcome. So basically, with these threats and with these attacks, Donald Trump is giving red meat to that faction in the Iranian political and military elite who actually wants to go to war, and is weakening the side of those people who are like, no, we don't want to do that. We want to negotiate. So Trump's threats, his rhetoric, his commentary is totally counterproductive to America's own interests. If in fact Trump and the Americans and J.D. Vance, they want some kind of deal with Iran in which Iran gives up a significant portion of its nuclear program, the best thing to do is to just talk softly and use diplomatic language and present any deal they offer as a win-win for Iran and the United States. Everyone in the world knows that America has the power to destroy Iran. America is the greatest military force in the history of the world. They can nuke Iran, they could bomb it, they could carpet bomb it, they could fly bomber jets over the country and flatten huge parts of the civilian area. They can kill a lot of people, they can destroy the infrastructure. But thanks to Donald Trump and this war, we also now know, and the Iranians know, that they can do a lot of damage. They can do a lot of damage to the Gulf. Potentially, they could do a lot of damage to Israel. And with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, they can do a lot of damage to the world economy, including the US economy. This was a theory that Iranians could close the Strait of Hormuz. But now, thanks to Trump, we all know that it's true, and the Iranians know that it's true. So now they have leverage that they didn't have before. So Iran could be flattened by the US, but Iran can flatten the US economy and the world economy, and it has much less to lose than the world economy. First of all, Iran is less connected to the world economy thanks to decades of sanctions. And second of all, they've been threatened by Trump in such a blood-curdling way that they see this as an existential battle for not just the Islamic Republic, but even for Iran as an entity, because of the extreme nature of the way that Donald Trump talks and the things that he says. And this is a really tough situation for the US to get out of. Trump needs to overcome his ego to some extent. He needs to modify his rhetoric. The people around him need to tell him to shut up and just let the diplomats do the talking. He's out there making these statements every other day, and the effect is twofold. On the one hand, he keeps bluffing, and that gives the Iranians more ammunition, more time to build up their military, as well as to make their case in the court of world opinion and build up allies such as Russia and China, build relations with India. You see all these countries around the world basically approaching Iran now, trying to cut side deals over the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has set up this operation called the Persian Gulf Strait Authority. It's like this racket for shaking down anyone who wants to come through the Strait of Hormuz and use the Persian Gulf. It's a way of like just getting some cash for the IRGC and to help rebuild the country after the recent war. That is basically one thing that he does. His bluffs don't help. His threats don't help because they reinforce the idea that America is not just out to eliminate Iran's nuclear program. It's not even just out to topple the regime, that America and its ally and backer and its whisperer, Israel, are out to destroy Iran. And that hurts the cause of the Americans, it hurts Western diplomacy, and it risks prolonging this conflict more than it's already been prolonged. Anyway, thank you so much. This week, we've got some great stuff. If you haven't yet, there was an interview I did yesterday with Hamid Reza Ahmadi. He is a guy in Tehran that I managed to interview for a good 40 minutes about an article that he wrote in the journal Jacobin about Iran's economy and how every single faction in Iran and outside of Iran has really no solutions for the core economic problems of Iran and Iranians. And he also talked a little bit about what life and business are like in Tehran now. So if you have a chance, take a listen, take a watch. And this week also, I said this is not just a podcast and newsletter about Iran. I have an interview with a Ukraine expert, and we talk a lot about the war in Ukraine and the changing nature of war in general. Listen into that. Thank you so much for being with me today.